your English podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your English podcast, the ideal spot to gradually improve your English with each episode.
Today, we're diving into something super relatable, especially, I think, for anyone learning something new, like, say, English. We're tackling that tricky business of how to be ambitious even when your brain is whispering, or maybe shouting, that it would much rather be doing absolutely nothing.
Right. We've been digging into a fascinating Russian source, of which you're the most.
Which translates to something like how to be ambitious if you're lazy. Catchy.
Very.
Yeah.
And how many times have you thought, right, tomorrow I'm going to really focus on my English, but then tomorrow rolls around and suddenly, I don't know, that couch looks incredibly inviting.
Oh, tell me about it. Story of my life someday. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
Yeah. Our mission in this deep dive is to figure out how to nudge that mindset, maybe build some genuinely helpful habits. Tiny ones, don't worry.
Tiny is good.
Tiny is manageable. And to create a system that actually works with your inner couch potato, to help you achieve your ambitions, even when all you want to do is, well, not.
Okay, so ambitious and lazy, they seem like total opposites, don't they? When you think about being ambitious, what comes to mind? What's the core of it for you?
For me, ambition is that little spark, that desire to grow and actually make progress towards something you care about, even if it involves a bit of a climb.
Like having a direction.
Exactly. It's about having a direction and taking steps, even small ones, to get there.
And what about laziness? What does that feel like from your side of it?
Oh, laziness. It feels like this incredibly strong internal resistance, like a barrier. It's that urge to just put things off, especially the important stuff. It's that little voice saying, not now, maybe later.
With the underlying belief that somehow, magically, tomorrow, you'll be a completely different, highly motivated person.
Yes.
Yeah.
That tomorrow person. We've all met them, haven't we?
Yeah.
It's amazing how quickly those excuses pop up.
Totally. I'm too tired, or I need to wait for the perfect moment.
Or the classic, Monday will be my fresh start. We have a real knack for justifying inaction, don't we?
We really do. And I think what's interesting, and maybe a bit sad, is how often we let little setbacks or mistakes completely derail us.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of thinking, okay, that didn't work, let's try something else, it becomes this huge excuse to just give up entirely.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, well, I messed up that one time, so I guess I'm just not cut out for this ambitious stuff.
Yeah.
Game over.
Exactly. But here's where it gets properly interesting. The source we looked at really dug into why we feel lazy in the first place. What were some of the key insights that jumped out at you?
What was fascinating to me was the idea that laziness isn't usually about genuinely not wanting to do something. Not really.
Right. It's sneakier than that.
Yeah. More often, it's this kind of disguise for something else, like fear.
Fear. Like fear of failure.
Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of the sheer effort involved sometimes, or just feeling completely swamped by the size of the goal.
So it's like your brain throws up a roadblock, sort of to protect you from potential discomfort or disappointment.
Exactly, like a defense mechanism that totally resonates.
Right.
And the source also touched on how procrastination can be a bit of a smokescreen, hiding something deeper.
Yeah, definitely. Often when we find ourselves endlessly scrolling through social media instead of tackling that important task.
Guilty.
Same. It's not just about being undisciplined. It can actually stem from a fear of not meeting our own expectations.
Ah, okay. So we set these incredibly high standards.
Right. And the thought of not reaching them is so unpleasant, so scary maybe, that we just avoid starting altogether. It's a bizarre form of self-sabotage, really.
That makes so much sense. And the source also took aim at some of those tired old stereotypes about laziness and ambition, right? That whole lazy people are just doomed to fail narrative.
Yeah, that whole idea that if you're not constantly huffling 24/7, you're somehow inherently flawed and will never achieve anything significant.
Which is pretty discouraging, let's be honest.
Totally. And the source actually wanted to challenge that by suggesting that many successful people have likely had to wrestle with their own lazy tendencies at times.
That's actually really comforting. Makes you feel less alone in it.
It really does. It makes the idea of being ambitious despite those lazy feelings seem much more, I don't know, within reach, possible.
And it mentioned how both of us have personally navigated the wonderful world of procrastination. Care to share?
Oh, absolutely. For me, it was a gradual process, like realizing that these feelings weren't some permanent character flaw I was stuck with.
Right, not like a life sentence.
Exactly. It was more about starting to identify the triggers, what situations made me want to avoid things, and then finding small ways to push back against them.
Yeah.
No dramatic overnight transformation, that's for sure. It was slow.
And for me, the real turning point was when I started asking myself why. Like really asking why I was putting something off.
To the root cause.
Yeah. Once I could pinpoint that it was often rooted in feeling overwhelmed or that little fear of failure creeping in, it became much easier to address those underlying issues rather than just beating myself up for being lazy.
Which doesn't help anyone.
Not at all. So what does this all boil down to? Well, the source makes a really strong case that understanding those root causes of our laziness, that fear, that feeling of being overwhelmed, is the crucial first step.
You have to know what you're fighting, right?
Exactly. Got to know what you're up against before you can even think about tackling it effectively.
Okay, so we've peeked under the hood at why laziness happens. Now, let's get to the toolbox. How do we actually do this? How do we become more ambitious even when we feel like our energy reserves are permanently set to like zero?
Yeah, the practical stuff.
The source we looked at really championed the idea of starting with super small habits. This seemed to really click with you.
It absolutely did. It was one of those aha moments for me, the realization that those massive, intimidating goals we have, like becoming fluent in English,
Yeah, huge goals.
they don't just materialize out of thin air. They're actually built brick by tiny brick through consistent little actions.
So instead of the overwhelming, I'm going to become fluent in a year.
Right. Which can feel utterly paralyzing. You focus on something tiny, like learning just 5 new words a day or reading one short article in English. It feels so much more manageable, doesn't it?
Totally. It's about lowering that initial barrier to entry, making it less daunting to just start.
Exactly. Don't try to rewrite your entire life story in a single day. Just pick one tiny achievable thing you can realistically do and start there. Build that momentum gradually.
The source had some really practical examples of these bite-sized habits. One that I found particularly helpful was the idea of creating a simple morning ritual. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
For sure. And ritual sounds grand, but it doesn't have to be some elaborate hour-long routine involving chanting and yoga unless you want it to be.
Good point.
It could be as simple as spending, say, 5 minutes just thinking about your top priority for the day, maybe jotting it down.
Just getting it out of your head and onto paper.
Yeah. Or even doing a quick mental warm-up, like reading a few pages of something inspiring or listening to a short motivational podcast. Maybe even this one.
Shameless plug.
Hey, why not? But seriously, it's about setting a positive intention for the day without demanding a huge amount of energy first thing when you might feel groggy.
And I loved the analogy the source used with physical exercise to really drive this point home. That really clicked for me.
Oh, yeah, that was a great one. It's like saying if your ultimate goal is to run a marathon, You don't just lace up your shoes one morning and expect to run 26 miles.
No way. You'd collapse.
Right. You have to start by being able to run maybe a kilometer, then a few kilometers, gradually building up your endurance over time.
So these small habits are like those initial short runs for your bigger ambitions. They get you moving without feeling like a huge strain. They build capacity.
Precisely. So the big takeaway here is that the magic isn't in these grand sweeping gestures that we often think are required.
Yeah.
It's in the consistent repetition of these tiny habits.
Little by little.
That's what helps us sneak past that procrastination monster and build a solid foundation for achieving those more ambitious things we want. It's all about those little consistent wins, accumulating them.
That neatly leads us into another key idea from the source: the power of having systems in place rather than just setting vague goals. You found this part particularly insightful, didn't you?
I really did. Because look, setting a goal is fantastic. It gives you a target, a destination. But the source really highlighted that without a clear, repeatable system to actually get you moving towards that goal,
You're just kind of hoping for the best.
pretty much. It's like knowing you want to bake a cake, but having no recipe or ingredients. You might have the desire, the goal is there, but the execution is going to be messy if it happens at all.
And you've developed some personal systems that help you stay on track, haven't you? What works for you?
Definitely. For me, it's a combination of things, really. I rely heavily on making daily to-do lists, breaking down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. Can't live without my lists.
Breaking it down seems key.
It is. I also use time management techniques like time blocking to stay focused during dedicated work periods. And honestly, good old phone reminders are surprisingly effective for those little tasks that can easily slip your mind otherwise.
Yeah, sometimes the simple things work best. It's all about creating a bit of structure so you don't have to constantly rely on willpower alone, which is famously unreliable.
Exactly. Willpower is finite. A system can run even when willpower is low. The source gave some excellent examples of what a systematic approach could look like in practice. One that really stood out was consciously scheduling a specific hour for self-development into your workday.
Right, treating it like any other important appointment or meeting that you wouldn't just blow off, putting it in the calendar.
Makes it official. And another really simple but powerful system they suggested was this habit of, at the end of each day, just spending a few minutes to jot down what you actually accomplished.
Celebrating the wins, however small.
Yeah. And then setting one or two small, concrete tasks for the following day. It creates this nice sense of continuity and momentum. You end the day knowing what you're doing tomorrow.
What's so clever about having a system, I think, is that it almost bypasses that daily internal debate, that wrestling match with yourself.
Oh, totally.
It takes away that constant decision of, am I going to work on my English today? Do I feel like it? Because it's already built into your routine.
It's just what you do at 10 a.m. or whatever.
Exactly. It shifts the focus from relying on often fleeting motivation to simply following a pre-established framework. It makes it easier.
Exactly. And that brings us to the crucial element of making those habits more enjoyable. Finding ways to keep our motivation levels from completely tanking when the initial excitement wears off. The source had some really good suggestions in this area.
It did. The core message was basically that if whatever you're trying to achieve feels like a constant boring slog, well, good luck sticking with it.
Right. That feeling of laziness is going to be a much tougher opponent if there's zero joy involved.
So you need to find ways to inject some pleasure or satisfaction into the process itself. For example, if learning English feels like a chore, maybe try incorporating things you genuinely enjoy.
Like what?
Well, maybe watching your favorite TV shows, but in English this time, or listening to English music you love, finding podcasts on topics you're passionate about in English.
Making it relevant to your interest.
Exactly. Connecting it to something you already like doing.
Nice.
And you like the idea of gamifying things a little bit, right? Adding a play element.
Absolutely. Turning things into a bit of a game can make them so much more engaging, less like work.
How so?
Well, setting small challenges for yourself, maybe aiming to learn 10 new words this week or complete one grammar exercise module, and then actually rewarding yourself when you hit that target.
Okay, rewards. What kind of rewards are we talking?
Doesn't have to be huge. The source offered some specific examples of positive reinforcement. Those little rewards can be surprisingly effective. It could be as simple as treating yourself to your favorite coffee after finishing a study session,
Yeah.
or allowing yourself to watch an episode of that show you love guilt-free, or just taking a short break to do something fun.
Pairing the effort with something pleasant.
Precisely. And I really appreciate the suggestion of keeping a success diary.
Ooh, tell me more about that.
It's basically just a dedicated place, a notebook, a file, whatever, to jot down your achievements, no matter how small they might seem at the time.
Like, learn 5 new words today or understood a whole podcast episode.
Exactly. Looking back at those little wins, especially on days when you feel like you haven't made any progress at all, can be incredibly motivating. It reminds you that you are moving forward.
You had a personal experience that really highlighted the power of seeing those initial results, didn't you? How that can fuel your enthusiasm moving forward.
Yes, definitely, man. When I first started being more consistent with my English studies, honestly, it felt like a bit of a push some days, a chore.
The initial grind.
Yeah. But once I started to notice even small improvements, like understanding a bit more in conversations or feeling slightly less terrified when I had to speak.
Those little breakthroughs.
Exactly. That initial effort started to feel much more worthwhile. And I actually began to look forward to my study sessions more because I could see the payoff. Seeing that progress was a huge motivator in itself. It created its own positive feedback loop.
That makes total sense. Progress fuels motivation.
So we've talked about tiny habits, having systems, making those habits more appealing. Now let's consider the environment we create for ourselves. The source really stressed how our surroundings can significantly impact our ambition levels.
It absolutely does. I mean, think about it. If your workspace is constantly cluttered and disorganized, papers everywhere, notifications pinging,
Mm.
it can be a real mental drain.
Yeah, visual chaos equals mental chaos sometimes.
It makes it so much harder to focus on any kind of self-improvement or deep work. Your environment can either be a supportive launching pad for your goals or, frankly, a constant source of distraction and demotivation. And you've intentionally tried to create a more supportive environment for yourself, haven't you? What does it look like?
I have, yes. For me, it's about trying to create a workspace that actually inspires me, or at least doesn't actively hinder me.
So practical things.
Yeah, practical things. Having a clean and tidy desk makes a surprisingly big difference to my focus. Keeping my learning materials, books, apps, whatever, within easy reach so there's less friction to get started.
Reducing those barriers again.
Exactly. Maybe even putting up a few inspiring quotes or images, something to remind me why I'm doing this, and also, crucially, connecting with other learners online.
At the community aspect.
Finding those supportive communities where people share similar goals and encourage each other, that external support is huge.
The source had some practical tips for our listeners on this front, too. Things like decluttering your physical space, that clean desk we mentioned,
Simple but effective.
but also leveraging digital tools like using planners or task management apps to keep your thoughts and tasks organized so they're not just swirling around in your head.
getting it out of your brain and into a system.
Hmm.
And that idea of finding your tribe is so important.
Definitely. Whether it's joining online forums dedicated to English learning, finding a local language exchange group if that's possible, or even just having one accountability buddy you can regularly check in with.
Someone to keep you honest.
Exactly. That sense of shared purpose and mutual support can make a huge difference, especially when your own motivation dips.
And another really crucial piece of the puzzle is understanding our own energy levels and having strategies for tackling procrastination in the moment when it strikes. You had some interesting takeaways about energy distribution.
Yes, this was a big one for me personally. I've learned often the hard way that it's far more effective for me to tackle those more mentally demanding tasks.
Like really focused English study or working on a challenging project.
Exactly. To do those during the morning when I naturally have more mental energy and focus.
Your peak performance time.
Right. Trying to force yourself to do that kind of deep work when you're already feeling tired or drained in the afternoon is often just, well, it's a recipe for procrastination and frustration. You just stare at the screen.
Been there. And the source echoed that idea, didn't it? Strategically allocating your peak mental energy for learning and those important high-focused tasks.
Mm-hmm. And then saving the more routine or less cognitively demanding activities, like maybe reviewing vocabulary flashcards or organizing notes for later in the day when your energy might be naturally lower.
It's all about working smarter, not just harder, using your energy wisely. The source also highlighted some specific techniques for when that urge to procrastinate inevitably strikes, because it will.
Oh, it definitely will. The Pomodoro technique was one of them.
Ah, yes, the Pomodoro, good old tomatoes. Yeah. For anyone who hasn't heard of it, it's a time management method where you work in focused bursts.
Typically 25 minutes.
Yeah, usually 25 minutes of focused work, followed by a short break, usually 5 minutes, then repeat. Named after those little tomato-shaped kitchen timers, apparently.
Cute. And it can be really effective, right? For breaking down big, overwhelming tasks into more manageable chunks.
Totally. It feels less daunting to commit to just 25 minutes than, say, 3 hours. That helps prevent that feeling of burnout because breaks are built in.
And I also like the suggestion of automating decision making as much as possible as a way to conserve precious mental energy.
How does that work?
Well, like having a basic plan for your day, even a simple outline of what you want to accomplish, may be decided the night before. So you're not constantly having to expend energy figuring out what to do next.
Reducing decision fatigue.
Exactly. It removes that little bit of mental friction of, okay, what should I be working on right now? Because it's already decided for you. You just followed the plan.
And on a personal note, the source really emphasized the importance of making these activities a regular part of your routine, turning them into habits.
So they become something you do almost automatically, like brushing your teeth.
Ideally, rather than relying on fleeting bursts of motivation, which, as we all know, can disappear faster than free pizza at an office party. Habits are more reliable than motivation.
So true. And maintaining a positive outlook, even on those inevitable off days when things don't go exactly as planned, is so important.
Yeah, giving yourself some grace.
There will be times when you feel less motivated or you don't make as much progress as you'd hoped. And it's crucial not to let that completely derail your efforts. It's all part of the learning process. It's not failure.
Absolutely. And that brings us nicely to our final section, which is all about reinforcement, accountability, and kind of tying everything together into a sustainable approach. The source really underlined the value of having some form of accountability.
Yeah, it argued it can be a real game changer. Just knowing that someone else is aware of your goals and is sort of expecting you to make progress can be a really powerful motivator. Keeps you on track.
So what did it suggest?
Things like finding a study buddy, someone who's also learning English perhaps, so you can practice together and hold each other accountable. Or joining an online community or forum where you can share your journey, your struggles, your successes, and support each other.
That external validation and support.
Exactly. And you mentioned your own approach to this earlier with keeping a diary and connecting with other learners. How does that help specifically?
Well, keeping a journal helps me track my actual progress, which is motivating in itself, like we discussed. But it also lets me reflect on what strategies are working best for me and what aren't. It's a learning tool.
And the community part.
Connecting with other English learners, even just online, creates this fantastic supportive network. We can share our successes, exchange tips and advice, ask questions, and just generally keep each other encouraged. It's amazing how much motivation you can get from knowing you're not alone in facing these challenges.
That shared experience is powerful. So, to bring it all together, the source offered some really clear concluding thoughts, some final recommendations. What were the main takeaways for you?
I think the big ones were to really embrace those small, manageable steps we talked about right at the beginning. Don't try to boil the ocean.
Start small.
Start small.
Yeah.
Also, to make sure you're acknowledging and actively rewarding yourself for those little victories along the way. Celebrate the progress.
Don't just focus on the destination.
Right. And maybe most importantly, to remember that making mistakes, feeling lazy sometimes, hitting plateaus, it's all a natural and essential part of the learning journey. Don't let them knock you off course or define you.
Be kind to yourself through the process.
Huh.
And crucially, try and build those systems we discussed into your life as much as possible.
Automate it where you can.
Yeah. So that working towards your ambitions, whether it's learning English or anything else, becomes a natural and integrated part of your daily routine rather than something you have to constantly summon the willpower to force yourself to do.
Make it the path of least resistance eventually. So our call to action for you today, listening right now, is to start ridiculously small. Like seriously tiny.
Don't overthink it.
Pick one tiny step you can take towards your English learning goal. Maybe it's learning one new word today, or listening to 5 minutes of this podcast again, or finding one English language website you like.
Just one thing.
Create a super simple plan for how you'll do it. Maybe I'll look up a word during my coffee break. Set a reminder on your phone if that helps. And just take that one small step forward today.
May ambition and discipline become your trusty sidekicks. And may that feeling of, I'll do it later, procrastination monster, may it take a well-deserved nap. More often than not, anyway.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope our exploration of this topic, digging into how to be ambitious, even when you feel lazy, has given you some useful ideas.
Yeah, hopefully some practical things you can try to find that sweet spot between your ambitions and those moments when, let's be real, all you want to do is relax.
Absolutely. Subscribe to your English podcast. If you haven't already, give this deep dive a thumbs up if you found it helpful. It really helps us out.
And please do share your own experiences and successes in the comments below or wherever you listen. We're always so encouraged to hear from you and learn what works for you.
We wish you all the very best with your English learning journey and all your other ambitions. Keep taking those small steps.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the podcast.